Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Liquid Lunch Project. I am Matthew R. Meehan alongside my partner, the Professor Luigi Rosabianca. What's on tap today, Lou?
Matt, today, if there ever was the opportunity to have a perfect guest for you and I, this is the perfect guest. This is a publicly traded company, so it taps into your Wall Street roots, but it's also a food business, and I'm such a foodie, man. So you and I are like living nirvana for the next 30 minutes. On the podcast today, we have Chef Alex Sadowsky, the culinary visionary behind Twin Peaks. And for those that care, Twin Peaks is TWNP, ticker symbol on the NASDAQ. Chef Alex, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, guys. Happy to be here.
So let's give the audience a little bit of context. You are operating 116 locations in 27 states. To me, the most compelling question for you, sir, is how do you teach our audience that is growing and scaling to maintain consistency through all those locations?
Yeah. Well, also, we left out too. We have 7 locations in Mexico now as well.
Oh, wow.
Mexico City. So international corporate chef, which is kind of cool. That's what keeps me up at night. That's a good question. Well, how do you maintain consistency? How do you spread something? How do you launch something new over that big of a system with that spread? I think it's just grassroots. It's just giving a shit, really, right? It's not that different from when I own my own little businesses. You just got to really maintain that care.
Now, do your locations, are they permitted to have local, regional specialties, or is the brand menu very consistent throughout?
They're allowed to have regional, local specialties. I work with the teams, boots on the ground. I'll fly out, cook with them. We'll go and eat at 10 restaurants, figure it out. Because if we're going to offer something like a Cuban sandwich in Tampa, it better be really good, because they can go down the street. A po' boy sandwich in New Orleans, you got to be better than the guys next to you. So really, it's how do you deliver exactly what you're advertising every single time, including on a Friday night when you're packed, Saturday night, college football, right?
Well, there's the care, but then there's also the consistency and the managerial care that comes on your part, because how do you prevent Twin Peaks, who is just an efficient behemoth right now, how do you prevent that from becoming a TGI Fridays?
Oh man, I think that's really the secret sauce, right? There's not that many gotchas, right? It's how do you work with partners that are long term, that are going to take care of you? How do you work with supply chain to make sure that they understand the entire way getting it to you? How do you get them to all buy in? And then how do you kind of end up being the cheerleader saying, this is why we're doing this, and it matters all the way through, right? To those vendor partners, to the supply chain guy, including the delivery driver, right? Like the guy driving the semi truck, I want him to be a raving fan and really care also, get that stuff to our back door at the right time. The cooks can cook it, goes out to a guest. There's, I don't know, probably 100 touch points for like a cheeseburger for us. I mean, even for a mom and pop restaurant, right? There's 100 touch points for that cheeseburger. I don't think people realize that.
I think that's what's always scared investors and entrepreneurs from the food and beverage space. It's those touch points, right? Because you're dealing with perishable products. You're dealing with the intricacies of labor, right? You have to deal with people. and then you have to deal with customers. Combine all that with, oh wow, I still have to generate a P&L.
Yeah, that absolutely is. And I've struggled with it for some stuff, right? Even when I own my own dive bar, right? It's like, that $3 PBR, if you run out, then you got some guy yelling at your face. But it's fun. That's why people all love restaurants of every walk, right? Like every demographic. People love restaurants. They want to go have fun.
I started out in the restaurant industry. I was a waiter. I was a bartender. I actually worked in the kitchen at some points in time. When a restaurant is pumping and it's humming and it's busy, right? There is no other experience in the world better to learn how to work in a stressful environment, right? So my kids will be working at restaurants the minute that they can actually start working, right? And you just learn how to deal with people, interact, communicate, right? And something's always usually going wrong, so you learn how to fix problems too
Yep.
at the end of the day. What was
100%.
your experience with Twin Peaks? Actually, what was the history behind Twin Peaks? Where did it start, and how did you guys get to 116 and plus 7 internationally?
Man. Well, we were the little engine that could about 20 years ago, almost to the day. Um, we started here just outside of Dallas at a restaurant called, um, it was a Rockfish. It was a kind of a failing fish restaurant. And
Hmm.
these guys, our founders, had this vision of, hey, what if we did a sports bar, something like Hooters, but we just did it right and did it well, right? And so the three pillars was like, we have to have really cold beer. We have to treat the girls well, and so that they'll take care of the guests really well. And then our food has to be great. And that's the three founding things that have taken one failing fish restaurant that they kind of cheaply flipped from, tackle boxes on the wall to now this sports bar behemoth that went public recently. So it's
So
just kind of this really cool Cinderella story almost.
you guys have a franchise model and corporate owned model too, right?
Which
So
that,
what is
that I was gonna say that's the big difference, right? Like, how do you keep yourself from being TGI Fridays? And I don't want to dig on them too much, right? But those overly franchised systems is when you start losing a lot of control, and you lose a lot of that soul of the brand. You have to have skin in the game. Having those corporate stores is super important to us.
you guys, you're not a small operation, right? These days a lot of people going into the quick service space, they're cutting down their footprint. What's this average size footprint of its Twin Peaks? It's pretty big.
Ooh, yeah, 300 seats, 8,000 square feet. Um,
Yeah.
We do have some small ones though, like in Mexico, and we're playing around with smaller prototype stuff too, because you never know when you're going to get that good real estate deal, and you got a really good corner, and you got to take advantage of it, right? So we have some restaurants that are third, fourth generation restaurant spots.
Wow.
Uh, Actually, the one kind of near you in Orlando, I think it was uh, Claim Jumpers beforehand, might have been a Red Lobster even before that as well. So, how do you take a piece of real estate, breathe life into it over 30 or 40 years, and make it still seem distinct and on brand for us? Our architects do an awesome job. Our construction guys are badass.
Hey, Chef Alex, on from a macroeconomic look at the food business, how does an operator like you deal with culinary trends? Like, do you remember like years ago, the three of us old enough to remember every menu had a Caesar salad.
Yep.
And now everyone's doing farm to table. Like, where does a chef need to be reactionary in meeting those macro trends? And how much does a chef say, you know what? That's not us. We don't do acai bowls.
Yep. That's an awesome question. So, especially in my previous life, right? I was really doing a lot of emerging brands, smaller restaurants, and getting them ready to scale up. Um, and we've always kind of looked at each brand as if it's a living and breathing entity, right? We called it the brand DNA. So talked about pillars, right? But that brand DNA, if everybody all agrees on it, you can look at every decision you're making against that. So acai bowl, nope, doesn't fit at Twin Peaks, but it probably fits at somewhere like First Watch. Their brand DNA that fits in there, right? But we're even looking at it from what beverages are we serving? What bourbon do we have available? What glasses are we using? What kind of ice are you going to serve? So really, it can make those day-to-day decisions a lot more clear of, is this right to steer the brand in the right direction?
So you've been with the company for a long time now, right?
Mhm.
And during COVID, what we've seen was a lot of larger restaurant organizations scale back their menu and switch things around. What did you guys have to do during that time to stay open and still thrive?
Well, we were blessed by being in some pretty good demographic areas that were the first to open up, right? So
Mhm.
we really just came out swinging in Florida and Texas. But we knew we had to change it up. To your point, I used it as a great excuse to clean up all of these one-off, right, one-trick ponies in the supply chain world. If I had a sauce that was custom made for us, nope. How are we going to make it scratch and make it in-house? Um, right? If it was the low seller, it just got cut. Kind of took out a lot of the emotion to it, and we could get a little bit more critical and put us in a really good position for these next. I mean, it's been 4 years of growth since then, and I think it was kind of that springboard that took us from. I think at that time we were probably 60-ish restaurants, so almost a doubling right at that same time. Really helped out a lot.
When you guys are creating the menu, you're trying to source a lot of stuff locally. What challenges does that bring about?
Huge. But there's some benefits to it too, right? And I think everybody can tell you that trying to purchase on a national scale, you do get a lot of weight behind you. But if you can get down to having a local farm that's growing tomatoes, understand that they are part of the bigger system, still give you a benefit from that buying power, but then I just have less transportation, warehousing costs. And then to go back to what we were talking about, that local person is way more bought in the brand in general. They want to be our champion. They want us to succeed.
How does how does that work with consistency, right? Because a tomato from New Jersey may not be as good as a tomato from Florida.
Well, they both are good, right? and
Okay.
that's what makes me have to travel all around and get all those points, right? And me hanging out in the airports is how do I go to a farmer and just they're really open to working with you. These manufacturers are really open to working with us. Hey, I need the tomato to be this size and this color because this is how I'm using it. And
Okay.
they'll all work towards it. Takes time, takes effort. It's not easy, but everybody wants to see that same goal. And it's because when you get down to brass tacks, like you said, when you go to a restaurant and it is humming and it's a great shift, that adrenaline rush travels the whole way down that entire supply chain. They all love it too.
You know, food's great, but let's talk about something a little bit closer to my heart. Let's talk about whiskey and tequila.
Woo!
So,
Let's do
first
it.
of all, are you a whiskey guy or are you a tequila guy?
You know, I've always been a whiskey guy, bourbon in particular, even
Okay.
before it was real
That's a good
trendy,
chef. That's a good
right?
chef.
I mean, I was the guy right in culinary school before it was a big deal that they were like, "Hey man, why you drinking all that bourbon?" And that's when it was still cheap, right? Before Anthony Bourdain ruined it for all of us. But um, lately I've been really digging on tequila
Yeah.
and some mezcals too, especially like a lot of the repos, anejos, the sipping tequila stuff. I mean, incredible.
Yeah, listen, man, you don't get really a hangover the next day from tequila.
No,
You do it in moderation and you drink the good stuff.
yeah.
Chef
Um,
Alex, what's your take on these celebrity chefs that have emerged over the last decade or so? I mean, you're a very handsome guy. You're very well put together. You're well groomed, but you don't give off this bougie celebrity vibe. Like, what's the deal with that?
I guess I got to work on that and get a little bit more
No,
bougie.
please don't. Please don't.
But thanks for calling me handsome. I'll take that. Um, you know, when I was in culinary school was kind of the rise of the celebrity chef, right? Um, I started in '05 at the Culinary Institute of America. Really, there was Emerald and a couple others around, but
Damn.
it was just starting to take off on the Food Network, right? And all of the kids that I went to school with, they thought they were going to be the next Food Network star. And I had already been a cook and a dishwasher, right? And I'd been getting my ass kicked just working in restaurants. And it was working for a family friend who I ended up being a co owner with eventually. So I saw that kind of grassroots, how hard you had to work to just make it day to day before I even thought the celebrity stuff was going to happen. So I think that paying your dues, that sort of stuff is really what has tamped down that celebrity chef kind of shooting star vibe in me. And I think there's some serious value to it.
Okay. Now, walk us through the balancing act of being an artisan, right? You went to culinary school. I can't imagine that being easy, right?
Yeah.
Especially at Hyde Park at the Culinary Institute of America. So you were with the creme de la creme, right?
Yeah.
Pun intended. How do you put the brakes on the artisan when you have the practicality of running a business? And let me give you an analogy to one of your peers, right? Shake Shack has its roots in high cuisine, right? When Danny Meyer started his restaurants, some of his restaurants had a farm on the roof. So he'd have the vegetables and the fruits. This is in New York. This is unheard of. But eventually, he ended up making more money selling burgers. What's the balancing act between being artisan and being an entrepreneur?
I used to have to watch the webcam to be able to go to the original Shake Shack, right? Sitting on the webcam going, when's the line low enough and I can run over there. But you know, even for Danny Meyer, right? He still loves his fine dining restaurants and that
Yes.
beauty. I do too, right? Love to go to them. But I think when I started really owning my own bar and grills, that's when I kind of could peel back and go, there is beauty in a really well made smash burger. And I kind of think that's kind of what Danny and those guys realized too, right? Like, hey, if we're sourcing really high end beef from the best butcher place that we can get in New York City and using that to make a burger, there's some beauty there.
It's like the pasta aglio olio. The simplest thing is the most difficult to make.
Right? Like there's that simplicity and that beauty there when you strip it down that is really cool. Now, I think I've always had a drive that I wanted to make some money, right? So, and fine dining for the last 20 years has been really hard. So when I've seen my peers that are doing that sort of stuff, right? The guys that are in New York City or in LA that are Michelin starred restaurants, 3 Michelin stars, the pressure that they put on themselves, their work-life balance to make $0. It's really eye-opening, really, right? And even now when I go around and look at some of these other restaurants, mom and pop restaurants, I'm like, man, the cards are really stacked against them compared to my buying power, the resources that I have available for our restaurant company. It's just incredible, right?
No, you're totally right. When Matt and I met on Wall Street, there were 3 to 4 dozen high dining French restaurants in New York City. Now there were 3 or 4.
Yeah.
We were talking about that the other day, me and Luigi. We're talking about when a restaurant, especially in Manhattan, when you go in, that's a lot of money. It's a lot of capital you got to put up to see if it, especially if it's a new idea, right? And you're not, you're just an entrepreneur starting out. I mean, you're talking about millions of dollars in a build out, right? Just to see if something will work. The idea.
You're totally right, and you got to think about it for your guys' listeners too, right? What's that daily risk? What are you putting out there, right? What are you betting and trying to make it happen? Even if you're an established restaurant, say you're going to start and launch doing brunch on a Saturday or Sunday, the labor, the food that you have to purchase sitting there waiting to go, that is perishable, hoping people are going to show up. I mean, it is risky.
Is that why some restaurants don't serve brunch or lunch? They figure that it's too much of a loss to possibly open and not serve it?
Yeah, I think, and it really depends on demographic, location, right?
Okay.
What do you have around you? And if you're going to be able to fill the people's wants and needs right in your neighborhood and do it at a reasonable price. So
out of curiosity, as an entrepreneur chef, when you look at areas like New York, Miami, the Strip in Vegas, do you look at that and say, wow, we need to be there, we want a flagship there? Or do we say, ugh, the overhead is just so crazy. It doesn't make any fiscal sense.
I think it's a little bit of both, right? Because everybody wants to be there. You want it. You want to be in the big show, right? Um, but it needs to make financial sense. And what we've seen is, we have a couple restaurants that are on the outskirts of Miami, for example. We've never been able to really crack into LA because that equation just doesn't make sense right now. We
Sure.
had a spot on the strip. Um, we took COVID as a chance to close it because it was a break even business and we
Yeah.
had to bust our ass to get there. So I think it's really, what are those good opportunities? Put yourself in that good position to find it, right? Not saying never in New York, love to be there. We should be there. How do we find that little neighborhood spot? Or, do we have to go to Long Island? Maybe, right?
I highly
Yeah.
recommend it. I highly
Yeah.
recommend it.
Garden City, Twin Peaks coming near you.
Oh man, I'd be there once a week. Chef Alex, if you could talk to a young, ambitious 25-year-old graduate of the Culinary Institute of America, and you could give him or her three pieces of advice, what would they be?
I do talk to those people, which is
Awesome.
kind of what I've really been trying to do is give back, right? And try and mentor some of these new up and coming people. I don't think people realize the restaurant adjacent jobs, even my own, right? Like, it's not the same as fine dining. I don't think they know the possibilities. They all think it's just going to be the celebrity chef thing, like you talked about. But there's, the corporate chef that sells the Italian made ovens all over the world, gets to do super cool stuff. Or maybe it's the person that, works their way up and does some country club stints, but then runs all of the kitchens for all the celebrity cruise lines. Same person, right? Just 10 years apart. So that journey, and how do you set yourself up to it? And there really isn't a ceiling as far as I'm concerned. If these people really apply themselves, because there's so many jobs and not enough people to fill them in the restaurant industry in particular, because there's just a high attrition rate, right? The 80, 100 hours a week at the beginning, not that dissimilar from being on Wall Street and being the analyst, right? When you first get
Sure.
in.
Yeah.
Uh, but there's all of these jobs out there, and AI cannot replace them. Robots cannot replace the human part of the restaurant. We'll always have some job security. Everybody's got to eat.
But chef, not many 25-year-olds that come out of the CIA are able to ring the bell at NASDAQ. How is that feeling?
Incredible. Um, really surreal, honestly. Um, but I mean, it is a small group, right? Even from the people that I talk to all the time from some of these other IPO companies, some of my other chef buddies, VPs of Culinary, right? My really good buddy at First Watch called me up. He goes, "Pretty cool, wasn't it?" I was like, "You know what? You're right."
It's fun.
um,
First Watch has one of those business models, and I never understood it because I went there at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. They were closed after moving from New York City, where every diner is open 24 hours.
yeah, but imagine you're a GM for that. You get to go pick your kids up from school every day. And
Yeah.
that's another thing, right? When you're coming out of culinary school, I don't think people realize that those jobs exist out there.
Alex, you as an entrepreneur, and I'm tapping into your operations managerial side. What other food and beverage business model out there, other than Twin Peaks, do you look at and say, they're doing something interesting?
Oh man, that's a big list. Big,
Oh wow.
bigger.
Yeah.
I
Give
think
us
I
give us
think
three or four. I don't care.
I think the good examples actually outweigh some of the bad ones, right? That you see
Really?
in the news all the time. These, file for bankruptcy, you know, reorganizing, all this other
It
stuff.
breaks your heart.
It does, and I don't necessarily think, going back to it, it's not necessarily a brand problem. They probably just got off the rails and kind of took their eye off the ball. Chili's is a great example, right? In the
Yeah.
news nonstop. They just got back to what their roots were. You got to make a good burger, right? You got to take care of people. You have to have a clean restaurant. You just got to really just, there really isn't that much secret sauce of that, right? A successful restaurant brand, good food, good service, clean environment, good price.
why do businesses fall off the rails? Is it hubris? I mean, some people would even say having an olive oil infused coffee is stupid.
I think Starbucks would tell you that, and they have been, right? So I'm okay. I'm okay talking about it. I don't want to badmouth them too much, but they're saying the same thing. Hey, we focused on mobile orders too much. We got away from being that third living space, hanging out, drinking coffee, knowing your barista's name. They knew your name. They knew what you wanted to drink. That's the cool part. Everyone wants that Cheers
Yeah,
vibe, right?
yeah,
They want the bartender to know their name.
But so the question becomes, where's the tipping point, right? Because we could do that. You can make it the third living room. I used to go there and I used to study for my Series 7, right?
Yeah.
Back in the day. You go there, big comfy couches, and then it becomes about shareholder value. How do we make things more efficient so we can increase shareholder value at this point, right? So there's got to be that tipping point to where, all right, we're totally turned off. It's taken 5 years. We're not even selling coffee. We're selling cups full of sugar at this point, right? But earnings were doing well. Well, they're trying to make them more efficient, right? But where is that tipping point? Is there a number of stores? Is it just the board and the vision of the place? What do you think?
I think it's a little bit of both, right? Um, and I think it depends on just the overall scale of the business too. So I don't
Mm,
know if you're a new emerging coffee brand. I don't know if your tipping point's going to be 5,000 stores like it was for Starbucks.
yeah.
Maybe it's at 100. And I think there's kind of a few of those aha moments as any business is scaling, right? Going from 1 to 3, really hard. Going from 3 to 10, also hard. 10 to 100, a little bit easier. Once you get over that 100 hump, 100 to 200, that's kind of that threshold, right? So there's all of these kind of, and I think it's every type of business, right? I think as you're scaling up, there's kind of these, okay, we have to reinvest. We got to bring in some more people to be able to cover this, and then that dilution of that culture and that vision. So as long
Yeah.
as you can make it through those barriers each time and run through, like we kind of did right after COVID, that's the key to success.
Starbucks went a little crazy though. Lou, do you remember walking outside of 45 Wall Street and there was like 3 different Starbucks right on the same block?
100%.
It was
Chef Alex,
ridiculous.
we're talking about 200 feet. There were 3 Starbucks.
It was
Yeah.
3 of them.
Yeah. Good for the delivery driver. He just parked his truck right there and ran it to all 3.
And my friends were still making fun of me because I'd buy the $1.25 coffee and bagel from the guy in the silver box.
But it's good, right?
It was
And
delicious.
that guy knew you.
It was
He knew
fresh
your name.
brewed. And he started making the coffee when he saw me walking 2 blocks away. So by the time I got there, he just handed it to me and I kept walking.
Yes.
But like you said, that sense of familiarity, the Cheers vibe.
I
Yeah.
knew I made it in New York when the bodega guy knew my order. I knew I made it.
So Matt,
Oh.
I don't want to take his thunder away, but I think he wanted to make an announcement. Chef Alex, are you ready to announce Twin Peaks, Garden City, summer of 26?
If you're putting up the money, let's do it right now, man.
baby!
Chef, thank you so much for being here. We want to be respectful of your time. How can the audience find you, get in touch with you if they have any questions, if we have any inspiring chefs listening
man.
right now?
We can kick out my email. Happy to answer anything. Phone call, text message. I'm around. And you'll
Go
probably see
long on
me.
TWNP on the NASDAQ. It's currently at $8.37 a share, and that's a bargain.
Yeah. And I think you'll see me at your local airport, probably in the Admirals Club, slugging a coffee.
Oh. Is that the next wave for Twin Peaks at airports?
We are looking at some. We're still
Good
going
luck.
to do some international expansion as well. But I mean, we're 20% growth this year, probably 25% next year.
Awesome. God bless, man. Congratulations.
Thank you,
Chef,
guys.
last question before I let you run.
Yep.
What's your last meal?
Whoo! I'm probably going a medium rare ribeye, loaded baked potato, big old glass of whiskey.
Nice and simple. I love it. Chef,
Right.
thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Everybody,
Appreciate you.
that's a wrap of the Liquid Lunch Project. We'll see you in the next episode.
Let's go!